All right, Republicans say that Alvin Bragg, if he goes through on an indictment against former President Trump over these alleged payments to Stormy Daniels at the time of the 2016 presidential election, they want to talk to him. But Senate Republicans are saying not so fast. Anyway, Congressman Bryan Steil of Wisconsin is among those saying, yeah, I do want to find out a little bit more about why the prosecutor is going this route, if he ultimately does go this route. Congressman, very good to have you. So you want to talk to Mr. Bragg about this if he goes through with this. Why?
My priority is to make sure that everyone is treated equally in the court of law. And I think there's a lot of questions being raised as to whether or not this engagement is partisan in nature. The questions that we ask in our letter are federal in nature. Three key things, and they're pretty clear when you read the letter. One, are there federal funds intended for public safety being utilized in this investigation? Two, is he coordinating with federal agencies, and in particular the United States Department of Justice? And three, is he usurping federal power as it relates to enforcement of federal law, and in particular federal campaign finance violations, which comes before my committee on House Administration?
You know, there are a lot of people going to look at this, including some of your Senate Republican colleagues on the other building there, who are afraid that this looks like you might be taking political sides in this and doing the bidding of President Trump. In other words, covering for him, offering some support. What do you say?
This isn't an argument on the facts of the case. That's for prosecutors and for juries. This is a question of whether or not there's undue political influence, and in particular directly related to a potential use of federal funds. It's why we've asked the DA to come before us and to explain to us questions that I think are actually important not only for the federal government, the United States House of Representatives to know, but I think questions that the American people deserve to know the answers to.
So, if he were ultimately indicted on this charge of having made a hush payment through his lawyer at the time, so that none of this would come up regarding an affair with a former porn star, if he is indicted and that charge sticks, if he is found ultimately guilty of that, is that a serious enough crime to warrant punishment to you?
Well, ultimately, that's going to be a question for a judge and a jury to determine. It sure seems suspect on the outside looking in. The focus of my questions and the focus of this letter in particular is to determine whether or not in particular federal funds are being utilized by a partisan elected district attorney in Manhattan to move forward a political agenda rather than utilizing those funds for the purpose in which they're intended, which is to protect public safety. This is all the more important when we see crimes not being prosecuted not only in New York City, but across the country by progressive prosecutors. And so the question you asked, that'll be decided by others. I think the question that we're asking is an important question to get the answer to, because by all appearances, this looks to be a partisan process.
You might be very right about that, but is it in the province of the prosecutor here in this case to explore this payment, whether it veers into federal and other issues? A payment like this or an issue like this would warrant attention from his office, wouldn't it?
Well, I think a lot of people are concerned about whether or not this is an abuse of prosecutorial discretion. We need to be reminded that the United States Department of Justice looked into this, made a decision not to move forward. Other DAs and other agencies have made a review of this, have made a decision not to. Now we have a period of time where the former president of the United States has declared himself a candidate for office, and we see this investigation picking back up. I think it's reasonable for people to have some questions about this, and in particular the question that I'm asking along with my colleagues Jim Jordan and James Comer is, are federal funds being used in this regard?
Do you feel that the popularity that the former president has enjoyed, some say that his base is rallying around him on this because he said you should protest when this moment comes and you should move to take our nation back? Do you support that kind of language, whatever happens, if this were to result in an indictment and an arrest?
People always have a right to have their voice heard. There's never a role for criminal behavior and violence. That's as true as it was as criminals took to the streets in 2020, including in my home state of Wisconsin, in Kenosha, Wisconsin. But where we see the kind of the circus at play is often how the media responds to anything involving the former president. I think it's really important that we get the answers that we're asking, which is, are your federal tax dollars at play in this investigation?
Are you supporting the former president for the Republican nomination? Do you have a horse in this race?
I don't have a horse in the race. What I have a horse in right now in my race is to make sure that we are administering justice equally to every single American in the United States, and we don't allow partisan politics to get in the way of allowing justice to be carried out.
And you'd have this view if this was a Democratic former president or present president being treated the same way?
I'd remain incredibly concerned anytime we see partisan politics enter our judicial system. I think all Americans should. We want to make sure that our judicial system is not partisan, that it treats every American citizen equally.
Very good. Congressman, thank you for taking the time. Bryan Steil of Wisconsin.